Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about yet another ship class within the vanilla game of Stellaris, and that is, in fact, the Destroyer. The Destroyer has a very interesting niche within the game, one that I'm not personally particularly happy with. I feel that Destroyers could be a lot more flexible than they are right now, as they are kind of pigeonholed into early offensive and then late game support units, which is something that like I mentioned, not particularly happy with. I feel that they could be used as a far more flexible system within the context of the game. But enough waffling, let's go and talk about the different types of destroyers. Last time we had 3 types of corvettes. This time we're going to have 4 types of destroyers. Let's go into our ship designer and take a look at our destroyers. The Star Destroyer, very straightforward stuff here. The thing about destroyers is that as soon as they come out on the field, they immediately outclass corvettes pretty much in every single way. The main problem with fielding destroyers early on is that you first need to upgrade your spaceport, which is going to cost resources, and then get enough minerals to start pumping out destroyers. Now, destroyers do have one serious advantage, and that is their medium missile slots, or at least their medium weapon slots. I put missiles in it in this particular case because, to me, missiles are some of the best weapons in the game as a 1.9 right now because of their retargeting ability and the difficulty of countering them if you do not have destroyers specifically kitted out to counter them with point defense. Regardless, why do we want to field destroyers early on versus corvettes? Well, there's one very strong thing about destroyers, and that is their medium weapon slots. Medium weapon slots basically means that their range is extended, their overall damage is increased, and in the case of missiles, their accuracy is always 100%. It doesn't matter if they shoot at a target, it will always hit. If that target's already dead, the missile will just retarget, or at least has a good chance of retargeting after the second retargeting phase, and basically will put a serious amount of damage onto any sort of enemy corvette fleet, which is incredibly useful considering last time we already talked a little bit about corvettes. And if we quickly take a look at the small missile slots of the corvette, the range of 70, while still impressive, the damage output of 8 to 12 compared to the Star Destroyer 16 to 30 with a range of 80 can definitely not be underestimated. Also note that I put medium fusion missiles onto destroyers because at this stage you should probably have your second tier of missiles or your weapon of choice available to you. Also, in addition, you can notice that I've started to kit out the destroyer a little bit. We got a couple more utilities being put on there, small improved deflectors. If you have the pirate event at the start of the game, if you're not a Gestalt consciousness or a hive mind, then a pirate event will pop up after the first colonization stage or your first mining stations outside of your capital system. The event will start popping up and you can kill the pirates and then reverse engineer the technology to get both armor and shields. So by the time you get destroyers, you should probably already have tier 2 shields and tier 2 power, maybe tier 2 armor as well. It really depends on whether or not your focus lies on towards the right places. Regardless, I've gone with a full tier 2 design on this one. It's very straightforward. Missiles everywhere. This is effectively the thing that you will see on the field when it comes to destroyers. Sure, the weapons may be a little bit different, but this is effectively what it'll look like. It's very boring, it's very straightforward, it's very utilitarian, but it works. So, this also means that we have a next stage of this destroyer. Let's take a look at the mid-game destroyer, because the role of the destroyer completely changes as soon as cruisers enter the game field. The mid-game destroyer is something that is a little bit different. Using the picket bow, we now have a barrier point defense. This means that the ship is better equipped to counter enemy missile attacks. I put some small railguns on here. It doesn't really matter what kind of weapons they are at this stage. It really depends on what you want to focus on and what your enemy has. They got a lot of shields. Railguns are the way to go. They have a lot of armor, maybe some plasma, who knows? It's there's a lot of flexibility here. But do note that I've stepped away from missiles at this stage because enemy point defense will be far more prevalent as they will bring out more ships, more variety onto the field, and some of these will most likely have point defense on them, making missiles a little less useful. And, of course, this point defense makes things very, very useful. You can put a picket stern on here as well, grab a couple more point defense. You probably have like a barrier point defense at this stage. You now have a very utilitarian ship that is basically only brought in for support to protect the cruisers. Very important, to say the least. Well, then we kind of... this is kind of what I mentioned at the start of the video. I personally don't think the destroyers have enough flexibility. In a perfect world, I'd add another utility slot right here, specifically for destroyers, to make them a little bit more flexible, like giving bonuses to fleets and stuff like that, or having specific roles for them, because that's kind of what destroyers are in real life. Let's go take a look at the Endgame Destroyer, because yes, destroyers do have a life after the end of the mid-game. So let's get something straight here when it comes to destroyers. I personally think they are completely and utterly useless. They are not the greatest, especially after the end game, but we kind of have to make use of them, and we kind of need some heavy hitters at the end game. So let's take a look at the end game destroyer. As you can see, this is a completely different design, and it kind of focuses completely on one particular type of weapon, and that is the Kinetic Artillery. I personally think that in the current meta, destroyers really don't have a place in the end game, but I kind of had to come up with a design to make them useful, and this is what I came up with. Welcome, it's the Kinetic Artillery. It's got a range of 100. It hits like a shit brick house. It's pretty much unstoppable when it comes to range, and it has a bunch of flak artilleries to take down the enemy. So, Kinetic Artillery, so it means it will stay at fairly long range and can do heavy hitting, and basically it will still stay with the battleships, trying to damage the enemy as much as they can, specifically cruisers and other battleships, and then any sort of carriers that are on the field will be countered by the flak artillery, which is relatively straightforward. Like I said, I'm not a particularly big fan of this design. I don't think I will ever use it myself because, well, let's put it this way. 2 destroyers on the field means 1 cruiser less, and I am gaga for cruisers. But we also have the final design, which is the mid-game support destroyer, which in my opinion is probably the most useful design for the destroyer. Behold, the picket bow, picket stern. This is the anti-missile, anti-fighter, anti-bomber destroyer. It is pretty useful within the grand scheme of things, especially once you are starting to tech your way towards your ship of the lines, and we will go over that in the next episode when we're talking about cruisers. However, this is basically completely designed about taking down missiles, taking down enemy attack craft, and staying on the field, making sure the cruisers are protected for as long as possible. The problem with this is that the cruisers are better at this in pretty much every single way, shape, or form, which kind of makes this a little bit useless, because, well, cost-wise, sure, they're cheaper than the ship of the line design that I will be showcasing next time, but if you're strapped for cash, and you know that the enemy is using a lot of missiles, and you know that they are using a lot of attack craft, then this may be useful. You can supplement your small weapons with anything, really. Hell, you can even put your own missiles on this. I just put some small plasma accelerators on this because if you work this in tandem with, say, the neutron torpedo corvette from last episode, you'll be able to take down enemy armor relatively quickly while still taking down any of their missiles. Very, very, very specific design for very specific situations. You will most likely never build anything like this in order to counter the enemy. And there you have it, the Destroyer, the red-headed stepchild of the Stellaris ships designs. I am not a big fan of this at all. I don't think they're useful. I don't think they have a place outside of their initial corvette countering, or at least nothing that a properly designed ship of the line can have. We can actually take a look at that and see what they actually look like. This is kind of what that kind of destroyer is designed to support, and in all honesty, this already has everything that a destroyer has and can do it a lot better as well. But we're going to be talking about this particular design next time. Thank you so much for watching. This was Destroyers. If you have your own comments about Destroyers and how to use them in game, feel free to leave a comment down below. It's always good to see different ideas coming out and see how other people feel about the designs that are available and are currently in meta as of 1.9. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, each other.